Hey guys, welcome to Feature Bootcamp Week 2. This is another free and public class that is intended to set you up for the upcoming Feature Bootcamp course, which is going to run for the next 6 weeks. You're going to write an entire feature from idea all the way to finished draft. And today we're going to be looking at structure and story beats. So we're going to be trying to organize the events of your story into the proper order, making sure that everything is clicking together. And we're going to try to ideally figure out what happens on every single page of the story before you even need to download screenwriting software and begin to format and block and scenes and write dialogue for scenes and all these things. So we spend the first half of the class doing nothing but pre-writing, research, and organizing the events of our story. If we could just make sure everyone's keeping your mics muted, just click that small gray microphone icon in the bottom left corner of your screen, and you will add that small mute icon to your avatar. Thanks, guys. Let's take a look. So we have plenty of things coming up. A bunch of new fiction classes in WordCamp starting out as early as next week. We have animation classes Tuesdays at 3 on ToonCamp, which is our animation-focused server. Coding classes on CodeCamp, which are Sundays at 1. And so that is going to be, as soon as this class is done, then Coding Bootcamp starts. And then there's a coding lab and help session that's now Monday and Wednesday at 2 p.m. On ScriptCamp, we have Pilot Bootcamp running Fridays from 6 to 8. We have Feature Bootcamp running Sundays from 11 to 1. And Script Analysis, new classes will be starting probably on Thursdays in February. We also have multiple events per week, such as Script Swaps, both on Tuesday and Wednesday. We have groups and clubs like Horror, which meets on Tuesdays at 6. We have Fantasy, which meets later today at 5 o'clock. And we have Table Reads today at 2 o'clock as well. So plenty of things to do. You can see even more stuff over there on the screen. And we have a bunch of free classes that are coming up for ScriptCamp, such as Finding the Protagonist, January 13th. Sorry, that's already passed. That date is not correct. Let's check these dates here. These would be the most updated ones. So, Pitching class, January 18th. That'll focus on communication of a feature story idea. And you're going to basically take us through 1 to 3 minutes of story content. So it's going to basically be explaining what happens, taking us to about the middle of the story, and then you're kind of like suggesting the remainder of it. Best Protagonist, that'll be Friday, January 20th at 11 a.m. Later that same day, we do still have a TV bootcamp. So that's 2 classes in one day on Friday. Subplots class, 25th of Wednesday. That's at 6 p.m. That's for both movies and TV shows. And then we have brand new intro session to this program, which is the Writing the Feature, Friday, February 17th at 6. And the new intro for the pilot starts March 5th at 11. So if you're looking to maybe start a new project after this, or you're inviting friends that might be interested in learning how to write a movie or pilot 101, like step by step by step, then those are great places to direct them. And by referring them, you will also get a free month of membership, and so will I. So please refer friends if you know anyone interested. A bunch of stuff coming up on WordCamp over here on the right. All these teal entries, such as First Page class, January 28th. Writing action and adventure novels, that will be February 4th. And that is going to include everything from your Tom Clancy military thrillers to your, Lord of the Rings type adventure books. There's going to be some touching on a lot of just different aspects of action and adventure in the book world. We have a class on query letters, February 8th. A class with an editor, which will include an FAQ or a talkback section with a pro book editor. That's going to be February 11th at 12. Go ahead.
Could we announce her name?
Sure. Well, her name is Max Higgins. I'm not sure if she has a website at the moment, or or I'm not sure what her most updated presence is online. So I can't link to anything yet. But yes, her name is Max Higgins. She will be our guest on February 11th at 12. We have an outlining class for novels Wednesday, February 15th at 6 o'clock, and then we have that brand new novel bootcamp course starting on February 18th at noon, and that's going to take you all the way through writing the first draft of a brand new book. Okay, so plenty of stuff coming up. Let's continue here, and we'll look at the schedule for this camp. So today we are actually on week 2, which is looking at breaking the story of these. So just ignore these dates here, but these are the actual.
Oh, sorry
classes.
about that.
That's okay. This is still the trajectory of the class, even though these the current date is the 15th of January. So So today is going to be looking at story beat summary with the goal of completing that entire set of story beats by next weekend. Next weekend, we'll talk scene cards, which is expanding your story beats outline into a full paragraph for every single scene, so we will know what happens on every page before we begin. After that, you're going to be writing about 20 to 25 pages a week from week 4 all the way to 8, with the first draft completed by December 9th. Any questions on the overview of the course here? Okay, let's keep going. So, if you would like to help out ScriptCamp, you can donate, become a supporting member, get access to all our boot camps and labs from just $29 a month with the yearly discount. You'll save 40% by buying yearly, or by donating yearly. You can volunteer. If you know a skill or language you'd like to teach, you can contact me or Nacho, and you can refer your friends. You will both get a free month of unlimited subscription and also a free month of Arc Studio Pro, which is a great screenwriting software. If you haven't enrolled in the bootcamp yet, you should do that. You can either purchase the class on its own, scriptcamp.net/classes, or you can become a supporting member. You can get a free 2 weeks free trial membership, which includes access to every class on every server, every event, everything we do, with that 40% discount for yearly subscriptions. You can sign up for that, scriptcamp.net/membership. If you haven't enrolled yet but you plan to, you can vote yes in the poll that you'll see in the chat in just a second. Meaning that we will give you all the permissions to see our the member chat channels and join our community. And as Nacho mentions here, ScriptCamp donations are tax deductible. I actually did not know this until right now. But if you choose standard deduction, you can deduct up to $300 a year for single or $600 a year for married filing jointly. Wow, you'll have to ask Nacho about that because that is a bit out of my expertise. But yeah, as a nonprofit, we do have special rules that are attached to our the way that we do things here. So yeah, definitely message Nacho with questions about that. But basically, if you need to sign up, you should do that. And you can make sure to get that 2 weeks free trial by signing up for membership at scriptcamp.net/membership. Here's everything that it includes. We have by now over 100 hours of events per month between all of our different classes and servers. The membership unlimited membership will include the rest of this boot camp. For instance, this one right now is a free and public class, but for the remainder of the boot camp, you will have to sign up. So definitely do that if you're interested in continuing beyond today. You get that free trial, and you will be able to attend everything you want for 2 weeks. That also includes access to our video library, which has recordings of every class and every event that we do. All right, so week 2, we'll start with check-in, and you can tell us the updates that you've made to your script, logline, or idea since last time. And we can sort of give you some more feedback to fix any issues or steer you onto the right path if you're struggling with something there. We can look at structure, some structural issues, and also some examples of story beats, which are going to be just basically the things that happen in the movie. But this is in the very abbreviated outline format, so we don't need to write a single line of dialogue in our story beats. We don't need to actually block out any scenes. You don't even need to have screenwriting software yet. So the idea is that you'll be spending a lot of time just figuring out what happens. The first 4 weeks of the class are just about figuring out what happens on every page. So we're going to make sure that that's all rock solid before we even write a single word. And that's what we call going to pages. When you go to pages, that means you move from the outlining and pre-writing phase into the writing phase, which we want to make sure that all your ducks are in a row by the time you get to that point, so that you're not doing 2 things at once. You're not doing the figuring out what happens and figuring out how to execute it at the same time. If you do that, then both of those things will suffer. So, but for the most part, you're going to try to only do one of those at once. You're going to focus on just what happens first, and then the second half of the class will be about executing that on the page, which is an equally important aspect of this, obviously, but we try to front load all the work, and we are really working as architects here, building the machinery of the plot and figuring out where all the pieces go before we actually start building the machine, or the building, whatever it is in this metaphor. So we'll look at how to just break story, which means just figure out what happens in it. We'll look at some examples and also talk a little bit about theme and argument, though these things are less important at this stage if you're just starting out. And the important thing is that you're just getting through this script, and by getting through a script and finishing it and moving on to the next one, you will learn exponentially more than you would have by just stagnating on one project for a very, very long time. So the 3 things that I always say you need to do to succeed as a screenwriter in Hollywood are going to be 1, read a lot, 2, write a lot, and 3, finish and move on. So that skill of moving on is one of the most difficult ones that a lot of people really struggle with when they start out, because we have great ideas and we believe in them, but you must untether from your ideas to some extent to do this. You're going to have to be changing them so much and altering them so much, and after 7 or 8 drafts with your manager working on developing a script, you're going to be like, I don't care anymore, please just send it out. So don't get too attached to any one idea or one expression of the events in that story, because you have to remain very open to change and collaboration, and this is a very, very social form of writing and working and collaborating with other people. So this is not like writing books at home in the comfort and safety of your own living room. You will have to talk to people. You will have to adjust your stories. You're essentially asking them to create a company that's worth millions of dollars to support your idea. So you have to be really ready to work with those people. So I would start getting used to that idea of receiving feedback and notes. It's not ever saying you have to change your story to do this. I'm not going to go to your house and hold a knife to your back and make you change your story to anything that I want it to be. I'm trying to make it the best thing that you are trying to create, and also just trying to get you used to the idea of working with development notes, which is such a huge aspect of this job. Okay, and at the end, maybe we will have some time for some exercises or something like that. We don't often have time for lots of that, but you never know. So we will see what we have time for today, and of course there will be lots of time for questions. So if you're watching on Discord, thanks for being with us, and if you're watching on one of our other sites like YouTube or Twitch or something like that, you can still participate. You can either join us on Discord, so come to scriptcamp.net and you can get the link to our Discord server, or you can just leave your comments in whatever site you're watching it on, and we should get them here, though sometimes it takes a minute and I don't see it right away. So feel free to hop in and join the discussion as well. We're glad to have anyone who has stopped by today. Okay, let's get going. So from last time, if you were here last week, you must have had an original log or a log line that you were just starting to work on or starting to develop. So if you have that, you can share that in the assignments channel, or actually let's use just the classroom text chat channel. So mouse over the classroom, find that small white word bubble that says open chat, click on that, and you should find it should bring up the chat on the right side of your screen, and then you can click the small plus icon to attach a PDF to it if you want, or you can just type in chat, just give us a sense of what is your updated logline. We want to make sure that we're finalizing those loglines today and we're getting ready to move on to our next stages. So definitely share the logline if you have that ready for more feedback. We'd like to be thinking of these sort of blockbuster moments that you can are going to fill out the premise scenes and some of the biggest moments of your script, like the midpoint or the finale or things like that. So if you thought of some really awesome scenes for it, you can feel free to share those too. And also, you need to be reading at least one pro script every week, because every week we will ask, what did you read this week? What did you like? What did you notice? What did you learn? There's not right or wrong answers to this. These are not to trap you or trick you. We just want to know, what have you been learning, or what have you been focusing on? What have you been noticing in the pro work that you have been reading? Okay, so we're going to go down the list, and I'll check in with everybody on just where you are. If you don't have a logline ready or something like that, or you're just not sure, or you're just listening into the class, you can also just tell us that. It's all fine, but just let us know where is your progress at, and how can we help you get unstuck if you are indeed stuck. Wes has asked, is this the chat? Yep, that is correct. That is the chat we'll be using today. All right, I'm just going to go down the list, which goes alphabetically. So we'll start with Brandon. Why don't you give us an update on where are you with your projects?
My pilot, I haven't gotten much into because I'm still working on other stuff, especially for school. It's a major pain in the ass. But one pro script I did read over time was, I did read your script, Fear in the Wolves. I didn't finish it, but I did read part of it. I like the intro, especially because I like the intro kind of has this band that creates this whole feeling of character around it.
Great.
But I don't really have anything I dislike because I haven't gone that far into it.
Good. That's the right answer. Just kidding. It's fine. Great. Yeah. So that's cool. You can definitely read my scripts if you want to. I would keep reading. Make sure you're reading at least one pro script from the blacklist every week too, if you're trying to write features, or reading at least a pilot every week if you're mostly trying to write pilots. So let me ask then: are you intending to write a feature for the course, or are you just listening in to try to learn more?
I'm just trying to listen to learn more.
Just listening in. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, we have a pilot class that's going to. I think you were in the last one So it's totally cool if
Yeah.
you just stick with one or the other. It's actually better to do that than to try to do both at once. So it's totally fine to just work on the pilot for now and just listen in and try to get a better understanding of structure and all these things. So we're glad to still have you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Let's check with Emily. Are you here, Emily?
Technology. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, so yeah, I've mostly been working on a comedy limited series. My first project in the last couple of years, and I've had kids and stuff, and so little ones it's harder to actually have time to work on stuff. But I have the first 2 episodes, like 70% figured out, and it's a crazy story with multiple couples or multiple soon-to-be couples and their intersecting storylines and things. So it's kind of like a crazy masterpiece, but it's good fun. And I'm not sure exactly what the question was. Sorry, I got pulled into something else.
That's okay. The question is just give us an update on your progress. So are you working on a feature for this class?
No, I just came to learn and join for the free class today. So just kind of learn about story and stuff. I think a lot of things are very similar. So.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, we also have a TV class going on Fridays from 6 to 8.
Oh, cool. Yeah, sometimes it's dinner time, so it's a little bit harder to join for. But yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for joining. How about Merc? I guess is that the name you go by?
Yeah, true. That is what I go by. Okay, so I'm here, and I'm starting a feature, right?
Okay.
My goal is to complete 5 feature scripts within the year, and hopefully this can be my springboard for one of them. The idea is I want to create a dark comedy based on an invisible demon who controls and concocts one character into like all these basically negative consequences kind of antics, like jokes that would like come over and ruin his life, but like he kicks out of it, right? That's the basic idea.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find the assignment channel because I can't post my logline in there.
Oh, just use
But yeah, I
the
am working
classroom.
on.
The classroom channel is fine for now. So just
Yeah, okay.
the voice chat text.
Okay. So last we checked, I have a log line. This is basically what I'm kind of working on. But you want to go over some of the log line again? Because I've kind of adapted some of the elements.
Okay, yeah, just post it in the chat and I can take a look.
Yeah, or I'm still in the midst of adapting some of the elements, but I do have the idea of what I want to write down. The idea is must survive till graduation, right? So one, I replace this word vagrant with homeless boy because that gets the idea across. That's exactly what I was going for. So it's a homeless kid who has no life outside of the school, but sort of the demon tricks and fakes his life, like out of there, right? So I thought, given that the point is that the creature and the man are at odds with each other, right? I would even just put the conflict as he wants to get back to his old life. He wants to just, I don't know, he wants to rid himself of the demon, and this would be the conflict. And then for the actual event, I would put survive till graduation as maybe it's like I'm even thinking he's. Well, what do you think of this conflict just alone? Like, he wants to get back to his old life, and this is what he's trying to do throughout the movie.
Can you read the whole thing?
Oh yeah. When a hopelessly compassionate homeless boy is possessed by an invisible demon, he must survive till graduation, as the creature amusedly tempts him into deceit, into living an alternate life.
What?
Let me see, because I didn't write the whole thing down. I was kind of in the midst of, like, working it into the actual thing, but here. Creature amusedly tempts him into living an alternate life at a college that he must escape before any of the people realize who he really is.
I'm confused. A college?
Yes.
What? Can you explain?
The creature would be essentially dragging him over to school. We would not know why. This would be revealed throughout the story.
So your main character is in high school.
Not in high school, no.
He's not in high school. He's in college already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the alternate life that he's now leading?
No, see, I'm sorry. The alternate life is that he is homeless and doesn't go to the college. The demon is bringing him to school for some reason.
I don't think I understand. I think we need to go back to the basics of this.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
There is a homeless kid. When you say kid, you mean a teenager, right?
Yeah. No, not teenager. I keep saying kid. I fucking forget I'm an adult sometimes, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Well, depending on the crowd I hang out with, it's easier. But, you know what I'm saying? It's just the idea is, like, he's a homeless person.
Okay.
He's a homeless man. He is being dragged to a college.
He's being dragged to a college. What does that mean? He's being forced to enroll?
Yes.
Why?
What? Yeah, wait, what?
Yeah, why?
Well, my question is mostly just, what do you mean? How do you force someone to enroll in college?
Possession.
He possesses him into applying to college, waiting for several months, and then getting in? You don't just get into college right away.
No, yeah, but maybe, no, I'm sorry. You're right. The way I completely skipped out enrollment, and what I would do is he possesses him to just show up. So it's not enlist, he shows up, right? This is the idea, in that, like, he does not enlist, and the entire movie, he's like, yeah, does that make sense?
A little bit. So let me see if I have it. Let me see if I have it straight. So there is a homeless man who's not a child. He's in his 20s. I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
So we can't describe him as a boy if he's
Yeah,
not
sure.
by any definition a child. Okay. So there is a homeless man. He is possessed by a demon. This demon puppets him to go to a college campus. Am I right so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Then while he's there, he can't leave.
Yes.
The demon won't allow his feet to walk off the college campus.
Yeah.
So what's the problem exactly? What's the conflict here?
Okay. Yeah, you're right, because that is very stagnant if he's like, well, okay, I have no agency in this, right? That makes sense.
Also, it just wouldn't be that hard to get physically removed from a college campus, I feel, if you aren't supposed to be there. Like, is it...
That would be the absurd aspect of it, right? The fact that in my head, I made this play out like a cartoon.
Okay.
But I think you're right. If it would need some sort of more... Like, I already think the tone of the film is gonna be much more absurd than I would think. Like, clearly all these nonsensical things are happening fantastical anyways. So, I would focus the narrative on something, and that's what we gotta find out. So, how about he goes to the college, and maybe I need to give him some sort of leg up against the demon. Maybe it's partial control. Maybe that's more of the conflict. It's like, he clearly has something, but the demon is making him do something else, so as that these two creatures are combating, and then antics ensue from there. So maybe it's more like, maybe it's not that the demon possesses him, but it, like, drags him around, forces him, and, like, maybe it gives him bursts of some sort of emotion, and then, like, he's trying to mess up. Or no, he's trying to not mess up, right? So...
Mess up what?
But
he doesn't even go to the school.
Yeah,
so why would it matter if people think less of him
he
there?
does go to the school.
He does go to the school. Okay.
He does go to the school. In fact, makes no sense. I'm definitely making him go to the school. He definitely goes to the school. What does he want at the school? Not making him a filmmaker, not making him a filmmaker, not making him a filmmaker, musician, because I have musician friends. Let's go.
Okay.
He wants to be a musician. He's going to school, And he wants to live his life as a musician, but wait, there's this demon that's not only dragging him around to locations he doesn't want to
Mm-hmm.
for some odd reason, and then it's like, oh shit, it's also like making him go into bursts of like fury, some sort of violent shit. Not even violent shit, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, uh, it's making him insane.
Right.
So this thing is driving him crazy, not only directly impacting his emotions, but also dragging him to locations wherever the fuck that means. So, how about that? Like, he goes to school, he's trying to be a musician,
Mm-hmm.
demon is stopping him.
Okay. Yes, the stakes are clear to me in that case.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this is now about a music student who has been possessed by a demon, and now, in order to succeed and graduate and pursue his life passion, is what you're saying, then he has to find a way to expel or overcome this demon. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So rewrite the logline entirely based around that, and you'll be in a much stronger starting point. I think you're almost there. It seems like we maybe just need to do some just a little thinking to make sure that's exactly what you want, and that is what you see the story as. But
No, yeah, I think that fits.
that does fit. Okay, then yeah, rewrite the logline based on that, and check back with me before the end of class, and we'll finalize it. Okay.
Swagger.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Let's see. So, and here's a question from Emily in the chat. Also, yeah, well, as we're doing the feedback, make sure to weigh in with your comments and questions in the chat, and check the chat after you're done working with me, and maybe some folks will have given you some more ideas. Nacho asks, does he want to pass the class? Does the possession make it harder? And Emily was asking, what genre do we want this to be? Is this more scary or funny or heartfelt? It sounds like at this point you've settled on this is like an absurd comedy. So if that's the tone you're going for, okay, cool. So thanks for that. Yeah, rewrite the logline. We'll check back soon. All right, let's check with Nacho. Are you doing a feature now, or are you working on something else? Are you focusing on the book?
Yeah, I'm currently polishing. I just finished like the fourth draft of that another demon possession project, and that was a lot of fun. And just now polishing it. And I think the next step will be to do a short. So I think it may kind of fit a little bit with the time frame of the class to do that.
Sure. Okay, great. Let us know if we can help you out with it, of course, but we'll move on if you don't have a feature that you're currently developing. Let's check with Wes.
Yeah, hey Connor. So just as you probably see in what I put in the chat, I refined the logline after your feedback last week, and so it's what's written there. So after an occult cabal releases a plague into the Ottoman Empire, a hedonistic physician with a dark past must eliminate the cabal before the disease spreads further. I wanted to just to make it concise. It's in the 15th century, and the cabal is technically a Kabbalistic cabal. Like they use they're into the Kabbalah. Like Madonna, but more scary. So that's essentially the log line. I like it. I'm not sure if there's anything that needs tweaking. Currently, what I'm struggling with right now is, you could probably tell, figuring out what title to stick with. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Got it. Okay. Let's read it one more time. So, murderous medicine, unholy scourge of Clippeth. All right. After an occult cabal releases a plague into the Ottoman Empire, a hedonistic physician with a dark past must eliminate the cabal. We just want to avoid saying the same word multiple times, if you can. So if you can find some other way of avoiding saying cabal twice.
Maybe eliminate the cult. Is that fine?
Sure. Or I mean, specifically, how do you eliminate a cult? Does he have to assassinate their leadership?
Yeah, he's gonna do some assassinating.
Okay, so I would specify there. So maybe something like, must eliminate the cult's charismatic leader, 3 charismatic leaders, or something like that. Just if you can be more specific and concrete with what he has to do. Before the disease spreads further, before the disease, spreads to encompass the continent, something like that. It's like, how bad could this possibly get? I guess is a question. Is it the world that might be threatened?
Okay. Yeah. Not necessarily the world. I don't want to necessarily make it a global thing, but definitely a threat to that state. Um,
And the continent, the state, the city, whatever it is, just highlight.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying spreads further, like that doesn't really have any emotional weight attached to it. Whereas if you say this is going to spread out and encompass the entire country, then we can start to understand what the stakes are a little better.
Okay. Sounds good. And should I, for the sake of precision, like part of the conflict will be not just assassinating the cult's leader, but identifying who they are. So would it, just to be more precise, should it be must identify and assassinate, or
Must
are we
investigate
going
and
with-
assassinate, must identify and assassinate, something like that. Investigate
Okay.
is probably a better word than identify.
All right.
But this sounds really cool. I mean, I love the premise. This sounds a little more like a fantasy book. To pull this off in a feature would be tough, but a challenge that I would love to see somebody accomplish.
Cool.
That just those two minor changes, I think you'll be set. Did you have any questions on this one?
Yeah. So yeah, I just made the changes on my end. For the log line. If you see the title ideas, I don't know if which one. The third one probably is a bit too much, but I don't know which one is most appealing.
Dark Doctor, probably not. Murderous Medicine sounds a bit like a Dr. Seuss or a Roald Dahl book. It's like, what is it? George's Marvelous Medicine. George's Murderous Medicine. Unholy Scourge of the Clippeth? What is the Clippeth?
Oh, that's essentially that's a Kabbalah thing where it's like essentially their version of dark magic, and so the unholy scourge of the Clippeth is the name of the main delivery mechanism. It's essentially a monster that delivers the disease, and that's what it's called.
Oh, it's a monster.
And yeah, the unholy scourge of the Clippeth. That's the monster. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not fully vibing with any of these yet, but that's okay. And the title is like something that can change around a lot. Since you have a pretty solid idea of what the premise is, I think a title will come to you the more that you work on this. I wouldn't worry way too much. I would say if I had to pick between all these, I would currently be like, none of the above, keep trying, but not a huge deal. Like, I'm sure you'll come up with something that works well.
Okay, fair enough.
What's the guy's, like, maybe if this is, I guess it might sort of depend on the tone that you're going for. Is this supposed to feel like a kind of Penny Dreadful, like, Nickel book with an iconic main character?
Yeah. So essentially, yeah. The way I see the main character is like a 15th century version of what do you call the Shadow, or a very dark version of Zorro, that sort of thing, like a proto Batman type of a character, but somebody who used to be an assassin but now is a physician, and kind of has to discreetly become an assassin again to address this problem.
Right.
That's
right,
kind
right.
of the general idea. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, it does. Pulp comic character titles or pulp serial titles. I think a lot of the time...
Dick Tracy.
Sure, Dick Tracy is another one of these sort of this realm of character. A lot of the time, they are just going to be directly telling you what is in that book. So if you look at, for instance, let's look at some Alan Quartermain books. The first one is King Solomon's Mines, which that is the sort of the hook of that book. It's like the Temple of Doom, right? It's like Alan Quartermain and King Solomon's Mines. So that's telling us that is going to be the adventurous setting for this book. In your case, it sounds like the hook is kind of this evil cult, right? And so I think that you were on the right track on your third one here. It's just that the average audience member isn't even going to know how to read Clippeth, let alone know what it means. So maybe just go with this unholy scourge of kind of thing, and then find just something else that reads a little more evocative and simple, like something as easy as the Temple of Doom, right? It's something that everyone would understand. And it's something that you could also put, like Joe the Doctor in ... the unholy scourge of blank, blank, blank. So I think that that's probably the right line to go down.
Okay, cool. Will do.
Sure, just my thoughts on that. But then again, titles are not an exact science, so unless you're doing like a high concept comedy or something like that, in which case they sort of are an exact science. But in this case, there's a lot of things you could go with. Just keep thinking along those lines. Come up with like 3 or 4 variations. I'm sure you'll get there. So anyone else? Emily had a log line that she mentioned that she could discuss or address.
Yeah, I don't know if I've like come up with a log line, but just the basic idea is that, and I only feel like I have a short film idea that I want to make a feature, but I don't know how to like extend the story to beyond the first 15 minutes that are in my mind. So, and I also would appreciate feedback if you guys have seen something similar already, because I feel like there might be other things like this out there, but I'm trying to make it more unique. So it's a sci-fi idea where basically aliens reach out to us by giving everyone a piece of technology, like an iPad kind of a thing, but it's their alien technology, and then there's like a game on it or something that everyone plays, like all around the world, no matter what country you're in. Like everyone is given this from the aliens, and everyone doesn't quite know what to do with it, and they like play the game or whatever, but then nobody figures out what's next, and then governments say, oh, this is actually horrible, we should not do this, and they ban the technology. So they're just grave sites are basically like dumps filled with these like iPad things from the aliens. And then one day I just envision it as like a poor girl finds one of them, and then it's just like doing some stuff on it, and then she figures out and like cracks the code or the key or whatever, and so then she's able to connect with the aliens or meet them or whatever, and she's like kind of like the chosen one who's able to do whatever the aliens have in mind. And so I have not conceived of the rest of the movie or things after that, but basically the aliens have kind of like offered this to everyone as a way of like, hey, we want to, and I kind of am thinking like maybe they want to see like, are humans moral or good and creative and things like that. So that's kind of the beginning.
Okay, that's a cool idea. If you're asking things that are sort of like this, just recently Arrival is a little bit similar to this in some ways. Have you seen that?
Right. Yeah, I love Arrival.
It's very good. It's obviously not the same sort of storyline, but the idea of, aliens come to Earth, they have some sort of limited communication or challenge in communicating with them that people are required to then solve in order to figure out, that's the challenge of the movie, is figuring out what they want and how to give it to them or how to work with them.
Right.
So a couple of things. You're right. This does sound like a short story, and it's difficult to pull off things like people playing a mobile game in a movie and have that be consistently visually compelling. Especially if we're just not quite sure what this game. I mean, I love the idea that a game is the basis of how they want to communicate with us. That's really clever and kind of reminds me of did you ever read Ender's Game? I think we were just talking about this in chat a couple days ago.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Do you remember the arcade games in Ender's Game? I love that sequence.
Yeah, totally.
Where it's like, it's a game that seems to operate by completely arcane rules, but that reacts to whatever you do, and like that no one can figure out how to really crack it because it's almost more of a test of human nature than it is a game. So that's all really clever. But it's very tough to make that work on screen, right? Because what does it look like when people are we going to show inside the game? Like, go ahead.
Yeah. Like I was thinking, like if that was only just like a very short part, and then this like jumps into like, because then she's like the chosen one or whatever, then she like goes to that planet or whatever. Like the aliens send a spaceship then, because the aliens haven't actually come to Earth. They've just only sent the iPads or whatever. So then that like unlocks her access to this world, and then I don't know, my brain kind of is on fire with like the possibilities after that. Like, so that's maybe only the first like few minutes of the film or something, and then maybe she like brings other friends with her to do some challenge. Like maybe the aliens are struggling and they need help, or maybe they want to come to Earth but they're scared of what Earthlings will do to them because they've had this as like a test, and governments have banned this item and this and that and the other, so like they see the negative possibilities of being with the humans, like, so I don't know, I just but like I was kind of thinking of Ender's Game of like that game part, but hopefully it would only be like a short part, because it is kind of in a way boring to have like seeing people play a game or something.
Well, that's why I think that you should do some more thinking on how you could expand this idea into the feature, rather than, because if you're saying this is only a small part of the movie, then I have no idea what the movie is, and we just don't have a clear picture of what we're doing anymore. So, like, I think that
just the beginning.
If this is just the beginning, then and if this is just like a catalyst for a character to get into a story that has its own sort of like stakes and conflict and things like that would need a whole different logline to express it, then this is just like a tiny piece of a bigger movie. Whereas I was really intrigued as to how this game thing could sustain a feature, and I was interested in seeing what the answer to that would be. So I would maybe suggest sticking with that and playing that out a little bit more, and making it so that either watching people play the game is compelling, or that we don't even need to see them playing the game for us to get the full impact of the story. I mean, like, think about this for a minute. If the game that they've given people access to seems to have no ways through it, or it's like impossible in some way, the world would very quickly collaborate to start working together to figuring out how to get through it. You ever see these ARG things that they released for in certain types of viral marketing? Like when Halo 2 was coming out, they had this whole website that you go to called ilovebees.com. It was like this very kind of complex code that you have to solve and work with people all over the world, and they crack it in like a week at most. So people would definitely, in a kind of Ready Player One sort of way, be able to work together to solve this, or to advance in it. But then you have to think, like, once you get to level 2, does it start offering certain options to certain players and not ones to other ones? Does everybody on the Western Hemisphere have one version of the game, and everybody in the Eastern Hemisphere seems to have another one? Does it actually have a multiplayer component, where it doesn't seem like we're playing against other people, but we actually are? Or is it like I would just start thinking, like, all the things that you could do dramatically, and the interesting dramatic things that could result from just being presented with this game that seems to be of immense importance, but no one can figure it out. That's a great sort of seed for a movie. I don't think you should blow that up right away.
I like that. And I so appreciate that. So now my mind is going, like, as a viewer, let's say we have some beautiful, like, you know, complex, beautiful storyline with all of that and, like, more depth and stuff. I would be wanting to know as a viewer, like, especially because it's aliens that have given us this, not just, like, humans on Earth that have made some fun thing, but like aliens that have given us the whole time. I would be wondering, like, so why? And I guess that's where I want to, like, think about a lot, like, why would aliens want to do this? And so if it was aliens, then, like, and if we're talking about a movie, not a series or something, then maybe, like, the first half of the movie is, like, all the beauty of the game and figuring that out, and then, like, the halfway point maybe is, like, okay, they've cracked it, and maybe it's a team of people that cracked it or something, and then they go to that other planet or meet the aliens, or other stuff happens for the second half of the movie. Possible.
I think that if we look at things, have you seen The Last Starfighter, for instance? That has a premise where, do you remember that movie? That's like, there's it's actually a great wish fulfillment sort of premise. There's arcade cabinets all over the world, right? And this kid is just really good at this one game I think it's called The Last Starfighter. And then he gets such a high score that aliens show up, and they're like, guess what? That was like a training device. We were looking for the best pilot ever, and it's you. And so they take the kid to be the best pilot ever, and he joins forces with a cool alien that is his co-pilot. And it's like a total wish fulfillment movie. What if you got so good at a game that it turned out that you could apply that skill to the actual thing in real life, and aliens actually wanted you to do it? You were like a hero because you're just really good at an arcade game, and that's kind of fun. So if we imagine that, first of all, if this happened, the first thing that would occur would be the Chinese government would set up a massive complex of the best programmers in the entire country, and they would have them on it 24/7 to get through it, right? And so you have to look at it and say, oh, it can't be something that can only be resolved by skill. Because if it could be resolved by skill alone, then that giant farm of the best programmers in the world in China or Russia is going to solve it quicker than anyone.
Right.
So it has to be something that requires a different perspective. And that's where, like, maybe Ready Player One is a good comp for you in this case, because that's a sort of similar thing where everyone has been trying to solve this game for many years because they think it's a skill challenge, when in fact it's like a lateral thinking challenge, or it requires you to, like, the main character, he is a master of old school games, like Atari games, right? And that's why he has the sensibility that he can approach finding the secrets in this very advanced game with the same mindset that you would use to find the secrets in the old Atari games. So because he's obsessed with old pop culture and old history, as cheesy as the references get or whatever, like, it is a good idea that it clearly shows why he's the main character that's going to get through it, because he's approaching it with a different mindset to everyone else. So a little kid being the one to start to, especially if you're set on this idea of a child being the main character, especially a child playing a mobile game.
Maybe like a 12-year-old girl or something like that.
Sure. So you should just ask, what is giving her some kind of unique perspective that the absolute best gamers in the world would not have? Because if they have what it takes, they're going to crack it very quickly.
Right.
And
So I was
so,
thinking, like,
go ahead.
what if it was just like the aliens were looking for somebody like with a pure heart, and then it has nothing to do with actually the game, but like that maybe the game could like sense who you really are or something like that. But then I was like, but lots of kids in the world have a pure heart too, so like why would it just be her?
Yeah.
So I need to do more thinking on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of this, like while you're talking, it makes me think about like what adventure do I want the audience to go on? Like, should it be like a mystery, like they are wondering, oh yeah, how is this game gonna be cracked? Or will it be more of like a rooting for her kind of a thing where they know she's gonna be the one, and they're like yeah, that vibe. I'm not sure what I want to do. And then part of me, because I love romance and stuff, I'm like, okay, maybe it should be like she's an adult actually, or like a young adult or whatever, and then she finds love somehow, like maybe through this adventure.
Yeah, can't really do that if she's only 12 years old. You can't exactly have a romance.
Well, I mean, we could do like a young love.
You could,
kind of thing,
yeah.
like,
You can do the puppy love middle school kind of thing if you want to. But yeah, you might just need to just ask yourself, what kind of experience am I trying to create here? Am I trying to create something thought-provoking and mind-blowing like Arrival that people will leave and they'll go, whoa, like I need to rethink my life and like think about things differently on this planet? Or are you trying to make something that's fun and like you can take a group of kids to see this? It's going to be PG-13. It's going to be like a summer movie, and afterwards everyone leaves the theater feeling like that was such a blast. That was so fun. Let's go get pizza. Like you might just need to think about what is the experience and the effect that I'm trying to create, because that's going to help you make choices that shape what we're actually doing in the story.
Right. And then my other question was like, does it seem like it's marketable? Because I think that's a huge piece. Like if people can't convey it in a trailer or in a one sentence to, you know, an exec or whatever, it's very hard for it to like actually get made and stuff.
Yes.
Or when it is getting made, that like hard for audiences to come. So yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Well, I mean, the thing is, big sci-fi is almost always going to be extremely difficult to get made, even for highly experienced, highly broken, you know, completely broken in writers. So I wouldn't approach this thinking I'm going to get this movie made. As someone trying to break in, you shouldn't approach any huge, because think this like, if this is $100 million movie, then are they going to give $100 million movie to somebody?
Could I make it not be a $100 million movie, but still seem sci-fi?
Yeah, no, you totally can. You absolutely can. And like Arrival wasn't $100 million, I don't think. It was probably more like 50, but or maybe it was a little higher. But regardless, you can totally do lower key sci-fi that doesn't require huge budgets. You definitely can, but it's going to be a different experience, and it's going to be maybe a little less focused on action sequences and adventure, for instance. And if it's lower budget, we probably want to show less of the actual game if the game itself is going to require, you know, 3D graphics and complicated visuals like that. Right. I mean, if it's using only 2D graphics, maybe that's kind of interesting too, right? I mean, or maybe it uses some, or maybe the game itself, like think of all the, the premise you've chosen is definitely something that can scale to almost any level of, like you could have this whole movie be a girl with an iPad in a house by herself talking to people on the phone. If you want to do this for like sub $5,000, you could do that. So it is a good idea, because I'm hooked by just the idea of the game that no one can beat, that no one knows what it means. And that proves that there's an interesting kernel of something there. But when we're trying to break in as writers doing big sci-fi, big fantasy, big action, things like that, we have to approach these as these are going to be writing samples that will help me improve and get better. And to maybe if I come back to this and edit it and all the stars align, maybe at some point someone can read this and I can get meetings off of it or something like that. But I wouldn't go into it thinking, how am I going to get this made as the very first concern. But the core of the idea is definitely, I am just leaning in and thinking of possibilities, and I'm excited to see where could potentially go.
Yeah, and sorry, also there, I'm in Sacramento, and there's this one film festival coming up, and it's like a short script film competition, but so that's where this idea came from, because I was like, oh, what's something I could do this short and sweet and stuff, and I have a friend who's in animation, so I was like, oh, maybe we could like make something happen with this. But then I was like, it was bothering me that it wasn't, I couldn't think of the rest, like after the first like 10 minutes, I was like, no, like this could be a longer thing. If I were to make a short film in the next few months with this, because the first part is less sci-fi and more just with people on Earth and stuff. So I was thinking that it was just bothering me that I couldn't think beyond the first 10 to 15 minutes. So just talking through it has helped me, because I would love for it to be like, oh yeah, I have this feature that this short film that I've made, and also a feature script that I could have in future and stuff. I think it it'd be really fun to do that. So
you can do that. You can totally do a short film version and then have a feature script as well. That's taking the same premise and expanding it to feature length. And then in that case, the short film becomes a nice calling card. If the short film does really well, for instance, you can be like, oh, by the way, I also have a feature version of it if you're interested. So that's all a fine idea, and I think you might just need to do a big brainstorm on all the possible implications. Well, think like what I was just doing. Like, what's the first thing that's going to happen when this occurs? Message boards all over the world go absolutely insane. The Chinese government sets up a massive facility of best gamers in the world. Like, those things are just facts that those would occur. I think, at least, in my opinion, that is a fact that would happen. Because, you know, every nation is going to feel like they need to get some kind of advantage. They need to be the one that comes out on top of this. Because the aliens presenting, especially if one shows up, I don't even know the logistics of getting a magic or like a sci-fi iPad to every single person in the world, to the extent that it might almost be easiest if they just show up one day and people's only explanation they can possibly think of is aliens somehow did this. That might even be easier to do than whatever else you were thinking, which would, I don't know what the alternative is.
I was just thinking like one day they just kind of like appear or they like jettison down or something like that, that they're here now and everyone's like freaking out about it.
Sure.
And I was kind of thinking like maybe the story starts when we're in this world where they have already arrived. There's already, because I was thinking some governments would try, you know, some countries would try to track it and whatever, but then eventually come to a point of like fear and like be like and also like dismay that they can't figure it out, so they're just like have these piles of the iPads and they've like banned them, and I was thinking that the main character would be in that country where she's like, and because she's poor and stuff, she's like digging through whatever, and then one day she just like happens to pick up one because she's digging through this pile, and then it's just like that and cracks it. So
I think that makes a little more sense if everyone in the world doesn't get one, because then we're sort of suggesting that, well, hang on. So if the idea is everybody in the entire world gets one of these, it's not going to be that special to stumble on one again. It's in fact going to be quite easy to get a hold of them.
30 years after, like let's say for 30 years nobody's done anything with them, and they're all just trashed now.
Can I give you a suggestion of why it would be so urgently banned, like why they would leap to ban it, and why it would actually be feasible that they would put in the resources to taking them away from everybody, as opposed to just being like, don't play with that anymore?
Right.
If people fail, is there a consequence of some kind, even if the consequence is unclear? Think like you have like 999,000 lives or whatever, and then every time somebody loses the game, then a life gets deducted from maybe their country, or maybe their maybe it's based on location, so only so many people can lose in one place, or maybe it's just all of humanity has a certain number of tries, it seems, and nobody knows what happens when it gets to zero. That would actually seem urgent and important, and like we have to stop playing with this because you might be putting us in big trouble by losing this game.
So then when she picks it up, it's like kind of risky for her to do it. It's like, oh, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to anyways. Yeah,
might be something
like
there.
More stakes. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and then
I love when we break story and like think of these different avenues of like, oh yeah, this is richer, this is richer, this is a richer idea. Like, oh, I live for this, so thank you.
Great, sure. Yeah, this is what, you know, the collaborative aspects of screenwriting are all about. So I think that just do a little more thinking, do like a big, we call it a sketchbook, where you just open up a blank document and just write down all your ideas for something, all the different directions that it could go, all the things that would happen. I mean, think a lot of people are going to think this is not aliens at all. This is God doing something. So be considering like all the different aspects and facets that could happen or would occur. And then you have to kind of cut away the things that don't fit into the experience that you want to create. So you have to ask, is this a horror story? Is this a comedic sci-fi story like a Douglas Adams book? Is this more like a deep emotional kind of philosophical sci-fi like Arrival? So maybe just focus in on some comps. Comps are just those, you know, it's Arrival meets Ready Player One is what I was thinking for you on yours, which would mean it's telling us it does have those sort of philosophical themes and also a sense of fun and adventure to it somehow. I don't know how you get that, and you might need to change one of the comps if you're like, oh no, actually it becomes very scary and gross, and my other comp is going to be Aliens instead of Ready Player One, right?
Or like Arrival meets Strange World or something like that.
Sure, and anything like that. So, do a big sketchbook on this, and I'm sure that you'll start to narrow this down and chisel away from the big block of marble that you're working with currently. But it's an interesting block of marble.
Yeah, so fun. Thanks so much.
Sure. Does anyone else have anything that they need looked at, or a revised logline from before?
Actually, Connor, so like I put in my log line in there, and we talked about what it was, but I think I might need to provide context because it might have implications on the premise itself. So, what I put in there is I'll just put it in here again just for ease of use because I made some adjustments after
Can I
your.
ask a question?
Of
How
Wes
would the
or of
log
me?
line be of you, yeah,
Oh,
or
of
of
me.
everyone, I guess. But like, how would the log line for this idea be different if let's say the whole movie is basically about cracking the code to the game and figuring that out, and we have all these beautiful, cool things about it, and then just at the very end they crack it, and then there's some cool thing or whatever that happens, versus if the first, half or less than half is about figuring out the cracking of it and the arrival of these tablets and whatever, and then the second half is meeting the aliens and doing whatever that is that I haven't conceived of yet. How would the logline be different? Would you suggest or thoughts?
So it'll be a kind of a big answer. So I can come back to this in just a second. I just want to make sure Wes gets to finish his question that he was asking just a moment ago.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that was happening.
Oh, no problem. So I'll come back to you in just a minute, and just keep that question in mind, and I'll check back in with you. Sorry, Wes, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so what I just put in the revised log line now, but then I had it in my head, and I think it's gonna for sure be part of the story, and I'm not sure if it needs to be called out in the log line. So yeah, the Cabal releases a plague into the Ottoman Empire, and obviously the protagonist is gonna be having to, investigate the leaders of that organization and assassinate them. But the thing that I failed to mention is that the plague is released, but the plan of the Cabal isn't just to release the plague; it's to release the plague to get people to essentially create a crisis where people would come to them for medicine against the plague, and that medicine that the agents of the Cabal are selling is what's making things even worse, and probably turn into some sort of like crazed zombie type situation. So that's the conflict. It's not necessarily the plague. The plague is part of an overall scheme or something more sinister. But that's not necessarily
More sinister.
called out on the log line. Yeah,
More
that's
sinister
not
than
necessarily
spreading
called out
a
on the log
flesh-eating
line.
virus around an entire
Yeah,
continent.
yeah,
I don't know if
yeah.
you need
Because
to get into it. It
yeah,
like
so it's like
go ahead.
they spread the plague and you have symptoms,
Mhm.
and we might need to change this, but like they introduce a disease into a location, and I'm kind of thinking out loud as I'm talking, and it causes some sort of symptomology. At first, I thought it was going to be a flesh-eating thing where you're vomiting out your guts, but I really want to go for the angle where essentially the cure is worse than the disease that's introduced. And so I might need to make the whole flesh-eating thing either be the as a result of the cure or something else. And so that's kind of what I'm struggling with right now, and I thought it might be good to kind of have that dialed in the log line phase before I move forward. So I just wanted to
I
get
think
your
it's
thoughts on
over. I
that.
think it's too complicated. I think it's too. It's just like you're sort of going into the nuances of their scheme and like the exact mechanics of their scheme in the logline. Whereas the point of it is they release a virus, and the stakes are the virus could get worse and worse and threaten potentially the whole continent or the world or a lot more people, right?
Right.
So I don't think you need anything besides that. And even if they're going to add this other step of we are also selling this fake cure that does something worse, that's just an extension of the scheme that you've already outlined. I wouldn't bother with it in the logline.
Oh, okay. Cool. That makes things easier for me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
much easier. We don't need to get too into the weeds on some stuff, and it's easier if you just give us an overview of what the bad guys are doing. Whereas if you try to take us through every step, it'll just raise more questions than it answers.
Right, and that's specifically in the context of the log line is what you're saying.
Right. Yes, that's right. So yeah, you're almost there with what you have here. I wouldn't add in that extra stuff. Okay, so we had Emily says not able to hear audio from Wes, only Connor. You may have muted him, so if you right-click on his name, you can find either there's a mute button and there's a bar that controls his volume, so maybe you turned his volume down, perhaps. your kids came back, so you won't be able to unmute for a while. That's okay. Just chime in and let us know when you're ready to ask your question. I'm glad to tackle the question that you had as well. Okay, so let's proceed. Everybody feel pretty good about what they have?
We could go over one time. If you want to move on, that also be okay. But
No,
I
I'll take one
thought
more
of it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's go. Let me get the whole thing. I literally just need to add the ticking clock, and that's where I kind of was. But this is where I got it. When an invisible trickster demon possesses himself to a pathologically mulish music student, he desperately has to force past his control to finish school and stay in a band before... I don't know if I want to put the demon ruins his life or before he fails. You know what I'm saying?
Let me read this again. Okay, when an invisible trickster demon possesses himself to... He possesses a pathologically... What does mulish mean?
Mulish, stubborn? Or even... Yeah, should I put stubborn?
I would.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, he possesses a stubborn music student. When you say he, the demon, desperately has to force past his control... Wait, who has to force past his control? The demon or the guy?
The student.
The student desperately has to force past his control. So by that you mean break out of the demon's control?
Yes.
Okay. To finish school...
Yeah. Keep this clear, keep this concise.
To finish school and stay in a band before he fails. Fails what?
I was even thinking that's two conflicts, so I don't know if for the log line it would make sense to just have the more core, right?
Is his main thing that he wants to finish school? Is he's like super passionate about his major and his subject, and this is the thing that matters the most to him?
Yes.
It is. Okay, then I think the band is secondary to the main conflict in that case.
The main conflict, yeah. And
so,
perhaps that's at the beginning of the story, but that still would make sense for the log line.
Okay, so when you say, I think this is all working, except for he has to break out of the demon's control. I would just be curious as to, do you have a specific way that he's going to break out of the demon's control, or some tactic that he's going to use, or some limitation that he has? Like, now that he's possessed by the demon, he can't say the letter E, or now that he's possessed by this demon, he's going to have to approach a disgraced priest to team up with him to figure out how to overcome it. Like, we're just looking for a little bit more of the specificity of what we're going to be watching your character do.
Okay.
So, a little more concrete.
Maybe
in terms of
it's
visual action.
reverse Pinocchio. Maybe it's like every time he says something honest,
his nose inverts.
No. Oh, that'd be horrifying. But no. I think it's more, oh shit. Can I just copy Infinity Train, put a number on his hand? I don't know. No, how about oh, do you know the show Infinity Train? Oh, I'm surprised you don't know.
Not heard of that.
Really good. It's on HBO Max. You should definitely check out. But the idea is, maybe he has a number. I would say a number only he can see on his arm, not on his arm, on his head, on his hand. That's literally Infinity Train. That's people are gonna see that. But whatever. Maybe it isn't from Infinity Train. I hope I can do that. No, of course I can do that. It's just a number. But the number on his hand, it changes every time he says something honest.
Okay.
I feel like that's a very
complicated. What does that mean if the number changes?
The number changes, I guess he's trying to figure out, one, how do I get rid of this demon? And two, the only thing that seems to be happening right now is the fact that every time I say something honest, it changes a number on my hand.
What is it?
No.
Who cares if a number changes? Is it counting down? As in, is it suggesting that when it depletes, something bad will happen?
Maybe, nah.
No.
The idea is if the number goes down,
So it is going down.
Something happens. Yeah. So the number
Okay.
is going down.
So it's not just changing. Okay. So in that case, it is a limited number
yeah,
of
but that
honest things he
becomes
can
a
say.
mystery story. I see. Wow, I see. I'm starting to get a really grand perspective on the infinite possibilities of writing here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially this log line. Like, you change a couple Lego blocks, it really is the entire. Like, this is the abstract version. Like, it changes the whole tower.
Mhm.
So when an invisible trickster, okay, I want to keep this a dark comedy. I want to
Okay.
keep this focused on a music student who is trying to go through his classes. That's definitely at the beginning of the story. Maybe at the end of the story, he's like, "Yo, I want to keep my band together," but he desperately has to force past his control to finish school. No, not force past his control. I want to say it was you gave me a break out of the demon's control.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe do a little more thinking on this. I think that this
Yeah,
is a good direction
on
for
the
the log line.
ticking clock. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
be thinking
Ticking
what are
clock?
the
Awesome.
yeah. If you have a ticking clock, if there's some kind of bad thing that's
Stake,
approaching.
or not even stake, but like he has like the tactic or the thing or something that's either helping him, discrediting him that makes it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Thank
Or a central relationship is almost always a good choice. So if you can frame this in terms of he needs to work with someone else to do this, if it's an estranged
Yeah.
friend, or you mentioned he's in a
Priest or-
band, if his band is the one
Uh-huh.
that needs to help him, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
then, or maybe he was like if his old band was like a death metal band, right? And now he's like, I don't want to play that anymore. I want to only play classical violin. Now he has to turn back to his old bandmates to help him because they actually know about Satan stuff, considering they're a death metal band. Something like that might
Hot
actually adjust this
idea.
up.
Hot idea, because I have a friend who I can consult on some of this shit. Thank you, Connor.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the connection of metal and Satan stuff works really well for comedic stories like this. The Tenacious D kind of world.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that'll give you some more ideas here. We do have to look at our lecture portion just to make sure that we are going to get through everything we need to today. So I would, if you do not already have your sketchbooks open and being ready to take notes, I would do that. Do that now and be ready to just write things down, write down questions that you have, and make sure that we are understanding everything we'll need to do for the story beats outline coming out. All right, so we're done with our check-ins and discussion. We're going to have to move kind of quickly through a few of these. I want to just go back to ground rules for everybody. So get used to sharing these ideas at these early stages like we've been doing, and being ready to hear notes on things. You might hear things like, I don't think that's working super well yet, or you might need to work on that. We're never going to say you're dumb and bad and should stop writing, but get used to these notes at all stages, even the very early stages. After this class, you should use your real name, so make sure to, if you'd like to proceed past this one, change your display name to the real name that you'll be using for the class. So let's move forward a little bit. We've done log lines. Let's look at structure and let's look at the story beats, and then I'll show you guys an example of story beats, and then I'll take questions on that, and we'll have some time to go a little deeper into it. So structure is the organization of the events in the story. It is what is turning your story from and then this happens into the concept of, so then this happens. So don't fight with this too much until you know it really well, until you know what these kind of rules are. They're not really rules, but these are more like observations of things that have worked many times in the past. Until you know why these things are there, I wouldn't start pulling wires out and messing around with it too much. Or if you do, then just expect to hear, oh, well, several of these things did not work as well as I wanted them to. And just understand that structure is really here to help you. And the best way to learn about this is by reading lots of scripts. You need to be reading consistently, week after week. And every class I will ask, what have you read lately? And what have you noticed and learned? And here's a suggestion: when you're reading scripts, maybe have a pencil or mark up the PDF or whatever it is that you're using, and be marking down the structure as you go. Write down, this is the catalyst. It looks like on this one it was on page 9. That's a little early. Write down, this is the act break. Seems like this is a little later than I'm used to. Whatever it is, whatever you notice, just be writing down on those pages where the different structural moments are. That will help you gain a better understanding of how these things are working together. And the fact that other structures, non-3-act structures, or films without any kind of structure that's clear to you, just because those exist doesn't mean that readers will understand what you're trying to do. They will almost certainly interpret your shenanigans as ignorance and dock you points. So let's look at acts. We have 3 acts in a feature film. Act 1 is your setup, Act 2 is the confrontation, Act 3 is the resolution. So we have act breaks between those. Sorry, that text should be white and not black. It might be kind of hard to read, but our break into 2 is when we move from Act 1 into Act 2. Break into 3 is where we move from Act 2 to Act 3. You can see from this diagram, Act 2 is the longest and most substantial section of the movie. They are not equal length. Act 2 is going to be the meat of the story, and we say Act 2 really is the movie. So let's look at just the numbers here. So Act 1, in a 90-page script, about 25 pages. Act 2, about 40 pages. Act 3, 25 pages again. So Acts 1 and 3 might be about the same. It doesn't have to be, like, incredibly exact. So let's just look at this for a minute and go over some of these major points before we start breaking into more detail on any of these sections. So Act 1 is where we are setting up the main character and the journey that we are about to go on, and we're making sure to let the audience know the tone of the experience they're getting into. So your first scene is really important for setting that tone, and very rarely will that tone radically change. I mean, very few hilarious comedies have a super intensely serious opening scene, right? Just like very few very dramatic movies have a hilarious opening scene. Typically, you want the first few scenes in those first 3 pages to be letting the audience know the ride that they are in line for and help them to get excited about that experience they're about to have. And typically by the end of your first 2 or 3 scenes, if the audience is no longer of the group that would be interested in this, then they should know that and they should be leaving the theater. So try to, in your intro, really clearly mark out what kind of experience this is going to be, unless you have some great reason for subverting that. So your catalyst is the event that shakes up the normal world, whatever that normal world is, and is going to present your characters with a doorway of some kind, because we see that on the other side of that doorway, through its glass window, we see there is something interesting or intriguing or scary or something worth doing a story about. And I think that we all have an inherent sense of what is interesting. It's not even an opinion question necessarily. To an extent, it is an opinion what is interesting and what's not. But if you look at it from another light, it's actually not at all opinion-based. I can tell you, as a fact, a guy doing a flip on a motorcycle off a ramp is interesting. You can pretend it's not. You can say, no, it's not interesting. I'm going to look away from the guy doing a flip off a ramp on a motorcycle. But you'd be lying, or you'd be being disingenuous, because you know that it's interesting, because it just clearly is. Just like I know that, what else is interesting in a movie? I don't know, an attractive couple who are into each other, but there's some obstacle in the way, and they're trying to make it work and find a way to get together. Of course that's interesting. I'm not into those movies, but I can't say it's not interesting. So I think we know what is interesting about we have an inherent sense of what is interesting to watch and what there should be a story about. And what you're doing here is you're managing the reader's attention in such a way that we want to make them feel confident that we will be exploiting whatever is interesting about this idea and using it to its full potential. And the best place to do that is going to be your premise scenes. Right here it's marked out from 25 to 45 of a 90-page feature, like 90 pages being really good for something like horror or comedy or thrillers, things like that, which just really kind of cut right to the bone and get right to the point and don't waste any space at all. The premise scenes are where you are going to be focusing all of those moments that you saw, a lot of those moments that you saw in the trailer or that you envisioned on the poster. If you say this is a movie about X, then X should be describing those premise scenes. And in order to get, I skipped over the break into 2 and trying the locks. I'll come back to those soon. I just want to point out a couple more things. So Act 2 is the movie. Act 2 should be loaded with the thing that you said that this movie would be about. That means that it ends up that Act 2 is actually full of radically different things than you said would be included in this story, then you either need to change Act 2 or change the logline entirely. So after we do premise scenes, we hit that midpoint, which is the escalation of stakes, and it's going to be a clear moment. It's not a series of moments, and some of these things we should just clarify, should not be a series of moments. An act break is not a series of moments. A catalyst is not a series of moments. A midpoint is not a series of moments. Those are the main things, and All Is Lost is not a series either. These are just one thing happening. So it's in the same sense that you can't have multiple final pages of a chapter, we can't have multiple catalysts, because then clearly only one of those things was the actual catalyst, right? So try not to have more than one event listed under your catalyst, midpoint, act breaks, or All Is Lost. From the midpoint, we move into what is called the escalation, where you're going to be hitting your character with various costs. Costs in terms of mental, physical, relationships, like everything that matters to them, you're going to start to threaten, damage, and takeaway in that section there. They're going to be forced to really show what they're made of and dig very deep to show who they are and to become who they need to be. The all is lost is going to be the character either fails at their goal or seems like they're on the verge of failing or on the track to failing at their goal. And if in a story with a strong central relationship, this will often be a breakup of some kind, whether that's with a friend, a loved one, or lover, mentor, something like that. In action adventure stories, it's often a death, like the death of a mentor, like an Obi-Wan or Gandalf or someone like that, is going to be around that all is lost moment. The pit of despair to follow is going to be the character is now living and wallowing in the defeat and the failure of whatever just happened at that all is lost moment. Now that their goal seems impossible, can they finally make that walk of shame back home? And what are they going to do now? How are they possibly going to go on living? Like, what do we do now that we failed? The break into 3 is going to be a moment where your character essentially digs up the resolve to take one last swing at solving the problem in whatever way. Make sure it's your main character that's motivating these act breaks and is the one that's driving us through the story and is acting as that kind of navigator through the story. It's not a story that's happening to them. It's not just them reacting to stuff. Your main character is actively making choices that are guiding us through the narrative. And sometimes that requires you to add things like an alternative option or an alternative choice to make sure that the main character still feels like they're in command of the narrative. I always give this example of if you're doing a movie about a guy who was conscripted into a war, and then your first act break is he's going to go from we're going to need you on a special mission. He's going to go from the trench and he's going to go to a different trench and he's going to do his special delivery or whatever he has to do. Then adding another character in to say like, hey, we actually have a chance to escape tonight if you don't want to go on that mission, can be a really great way to make your main character more active, right? Because if it just seems like they're being forced to do everything in the plot, it's their job. He has to. He has no choice. It's not going to feel like a very effective story because the main character isn't driving it. But if the deserters are like, hey, we opened up the barbed wire, we can all go home and escape. Do you want to come with us? That does force them to make a choice. It makes them say, I'm committing to stay. I am going to go on the mission, even though I might not have to. So adding in alternatives is a great way to keep your main character active as possible. And you see this all the time once you start looking for this. What else? Pit of Despair. Yeah, we swing out of the Pit of Despair into their break into 3, where your main character is going to lock and load and take one last attempt to beat the bad guys because of the journey of the movie. They've been inspired to change or to learn some truth or to realize something that they've been denying up until now. And now in the finale, they're going to become that final version of themselves. They're going to become the sort of person they were destined to be, or the person they needed to be, often where they're going to sort of synthesize who they always were with what the values that they've learned in Act 2, and they come into Act 3 with a combination of both of those things, and now are able to tackle this final problem. They either win or they don't win. They don't have to win at all, but at the end, we have a few pages. I don't have it on this chart here, but we have about 5 pages perhaps at the end for epilogue, wrapping everything up, denouement kind of stuff, where we say this is the impact that their journey has had on the world or on their family or on themselves, and we sort of just clarify what has changed and why, and give us a peek at what the world has in store next. So what is going to happen, what becomes of their lives after this, and we want to sort of imagine that their lives existed before the movie began and are going to persist after the movie ends, unless everyone dies or something, unless you blow up the whole world. Okay, so hope that's clear. I'm going to look at this updated logline from Emily. Maybe she's not able to speak or respond yet, but I can at least comment on it if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Okay, good. Let's take a look. Okay, so a girl must crack an alien computer game versus a girl cracks an alien computer game and must serve as the first alien liaison. Right, exactly. And so that's two totally different movies. The first one would be a little more like Arrival, where it's going to be like we're seeing this your main character be the person who cuts through the noise and is able to actually solve this problem that a lot of people all over the world are trying to collaborate together to resolve, versus this other version where it's essentially we're doing a sci-fi adventure, but the catalyst is just based on this game. So yeah, you will have to just make the choice between what are you more interested in, I guess would be our question.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Sure. Hope that's helpful. Okay, and try, if you haven't already written it down, then our template that we often suggest starting with looks like this. So it's when inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. So maybe that'll help you just start to just try stuff out and see what works. And I'll paste that in the chat for you. Okay, let's proceed here with our next couple slides. And I can go a little deeper into these story beats. I know we only have half an hour left today. I will get into a little bit into some common problems, and then I'd rather look at an example set of story beats than spend too long on theme and argument today, probably. And then I'm not sure how much of the exercises we'll probably have time to get to. Probably not too much. That's okay. Okay, so let's go into more detail on story beats and just make sure that everyone's fully understanding this and you're writing this down and making sure to ask any questions if you're not clear on what any of these things mean, because although we do go over these all the time, we're not always going to be talking about structure, so it will be assumed that you will have reviewed this. If you need to, you can access these slides later, or if you're a member, you can watch the recording later. Actually, this is a free public class. You can watch the recording anytime on YouTube. Let me make sure we don't have any questions or comments from anyone on our various streams. Oh, I think we do, actually. From Tallulah Chanel. Hi, Tallulah. Tallulah says, I'm working on a short story about a mutant who's a love manipulator. A love manipulator? Is that just like a person who breaks people's hearts all the time, or is that like a magic power? I guess would be my question. He has feelings for a girl at his school who he later finds out is a love negator. Okay. So I think it is powers, like X-Men kind of style there. That sounds interesting. I mean, two people with love-based powers kind of clashing and colliding in school, or maybe we're sort of doing like a superhero-ish supernatural romance kind of story, something like that. I would love to see a clearer direction for where it was going. Maybe try using the template that we mentioned today, which I'll bring back up on the screen so you can look at it if you want. It's going to look like, where'd it go? When inciting incidents, oh, it's not on here. Here it is. Okay, so when or after inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before or in order to stakes or ticking clock. So try reframing what you have just in those terms to Lula, and I think that this will help you figure out where the story is going and just help you imagine it as a feature a little more easily. Okay, let's stop here and see, does anyone have any questions on anything we talked about regarding structure and loglines so far? So from a strong logline... Go ahead.
Sorry, Connor, I was looking for the mute button. So there's a 3-act structure, but I've also recently heard of something called the 5-act structure, and I suspect, the extra 2 acts are encompassed by what would in the 3-act structure be in the 2nd act, but I'm not sure. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so we use 5 acts in things like pilots. Hour-long pilots usually will have 5 acts, and certain Shakespeare plays have 5 acts, but beyond that, it's all pretty much talking in terms. We're talking in terms of 3-act, and yeah, even on an hour-long pilot, you can take what you have there and just split it into 3 chunks, and you're like, oh, I guess it basically is just 3 acts. So I would only really think about 5 acts when you're writing hour-long pilots, and that's mostly, it doesn't change the beats themselves, and it doesn't really change how they play out beyond the fact that in an hour-long TV show, we have act breaks every 12 minutes or so, because they're like basically commercial breaks, right? So we do have a bit more of a sense of propulsion through the story thanks to those commercial breaks, or thanks to those moments that could be commercial breaks, assuming you go on a network channel. So when writing in 5-act, it requires you to leave us on every act break with something that will compel the audience to return after the commercial, whether that is a cliffhanger, a big question that's raised, an interesting reveal, or something like that. So it can be really useful in writing TV. But for features, I don't really know how you would conceive of them in 5 acts. Maybe there's a way that I just have never seen described. But I would stay in 3-act world in writing features, and especially when you're doing development meetings and you're meeting with producers and talking with people that are not just other writers in the industry. They're not really going to know what you mean when you're talking in terms of 5 acts.
Understood. So just to kind of make sure I'm downloading what you're saying correctly, like a 5-act structure is only needed, necessary in the context of a medium that has commercial breaks. Features don't have that, so it doesn't make sense to talk in 5 acts.
I would say
Stick
so.
to 3-act.
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe there's some brilliant 5-act deconstruction of features that somebody has come up with, but I'm not familiar with it, haven't seen it, and I don't think most people in the industry will be attuned to what you're talking about. So I would just focus on learning 3-act structure like the back of your hand, and that way you're not going to leave anyone out. You're not going to like run into some executive where you're like, well, in the 4th act, and they'll be like, wait, what's a 4th act? What are you talking about?
Understood. Thank you.
Sure. But if it's helpful for you, you're free to look at other structures and other styles and things. And somebody, I can't remember who it was talking about 8 sequence format before, and I was just like, I can't help you with this. I can only talk in 3-act terms, but if 8 sequence helps you write a draft, then you use whatever you must.
Yeah, no, I like for me, like 3 acts is plenty. Like somebody was talking to me and they mentioned 5 acts, and I'm like, what? No, no extra work, please.
3 is enough. 3 is plenty. Good questions though. Other questions on structure and perhaps log lines? We have an updated logline from Emily, or just a brainstorming logline. When a resourceful middle schooler solves a banned alien computer game sent to humanity, okay, great, she must serve as the first alien liaison without her government finding out. Okay, so I guess we would ask the question, like, what does that mean? What does she actually have to do? Is she acting as like a diplomat between the humans and the aliens? In which case, I would just kind of specify what she has to do as a diplomat. Do you have to prevent a war between us, or something like that? Or I guess just, we need to have a sense of what we're watching people do in the majority of the movie. But it's an interesting start. I mean, it could definitely go there as well. I really like, personally, the game, solving of the game being most of the story, with maybe this happening towards, as like the break into 3, or something like that. I really like that myself, but you got to just do what's most interesting to you, and whatever is going to lead you to the sort of genre thrills that you are offering, whatever the genre is that you are, or the subgenre that you are focusing on. Like, is this more adventure, or is this more of a drama, or is this more comedic, or whatever it is. So yeah, keep tunneling down, but you're definitely getting there. All right. Other questions on structure? So I want to bring up the big list of story beats. Here we go. And I'm going to just sort of go down the list and re-summarize what each of these things does, and I will ask if anyone has any specific questions on how these moments work, if they want examples of some of these moments, or just any other things that are not clear, because it's essential that you get these things down. Okay, so we'll start with our intro. Everybody totally clear on what the intro has to do? Let's have a volunteer explain to us what the intro is for.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
The intro is a couple scenes that basically, or the first scene that establishes the tone of the oncoming story, that give your audience an expectation of what kind of enjoyment they'll be able to get out of the movie, and the idea is your intro should establish, 1, why you should watch the film, or at least, if there is a grand subversion, better be a good reason, and then 2, no shit, anybody who's even by the sense of the movie is not gonna, really come to that, they should probably know too. It should be basically a defined idea of tone and style.
Yeah, all good points. And I think the other big thing we're doing in the intro is we are establishing the normal world. So the main character's life before it changes in the catalyst.
Yeah. The orderly world.
Sure.
in
Even if
yeah,
their
boot
orderly
camp
world
was.
is crazy, if they're like a SWAT officer,
Mhm.
then their normal world might be I
It's
go shoot bad guys
their
every single day.
status quo.
Yeah,
It's their status quo. Mhm.
exactly. All right, let's go to catalysts. Volunteers? Anyone? Let's just keep going. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, the catalyst is the inciting incident. It's the
Mm-hmm.
incident that basically takes the character from their orderly world into a world that they all of a sudden have no bearings on and must adapt to.
So it doesn't quite take us into the new world yet, but it is going to
Yeah,
show the possibility of a new world to us.
show the possibility. Yeah.
Right, right. So
Thank
the break into two is when they really go in. It's when they go through the door. So if let's say we're doing a detective movie, every day your character solves cases. Your catalyst is you get a new case. It seems like it's gonna be a bit of a tricky one, and trying the lock sequence, which follows the catalyst, is where we're going to explore. Wait a minute, things don't add up in this case, though. But it turns out it couldn't have been the person they thought it was. It turns out the police bungled the investigation. This is going to be way harder than I thought. And then that break into two is the moment where your character is offered that choice, like the person who gave them the case is like, I understand if you want to back out. Every other detective I've hired has backed out. Are you sure you want to take it? This is where they say,
Yeah.
yes, I'm sure. And that's where they move through. So definitely don't neglect that trying the lock sequence where we are. Now that that door has been unveiled to us, then there's going to be if it's an easy choice to make, it probably isn't a good idea for a movie, because movies aren't about easy choices and simple journeys. Or I guess I should say, simple is actually something we are often going for, but they're not about journeys that your characters can overcome without changing who they are at all. All right, so we break into two, which is now, you're right, we go into that sort of upside down, topsy-turvy world where the main character is now perhaps a fish out of water. They're now struggling. They are, even if they are competent, then they are still being pushed to the edge of that competence as they try to accomplish their goal. That's going to take us into the premise scenes. Go ahead and explain what we're doing in premise scenes.
Oh, I'm sorry. This I would have to give to someone else. But if you would like to go over to, the idea is, I was in midway some of my log line, but, yeah, if I could give that to someone else.
Sure. Any other volunteer?
So for the premise scenes, I think that's where I think you also call it fun and games, where it's essentially the scenes that encompass the bulk of your movie. So, when it comes to if it's Alien, if it's the movie Aliens, it's the scenes where they're fighting and trying to survive the alien. So that's where like the bulk of the conflict is shown is in the premise scenes.
Yeah, great points. And this should be a really fun section of the movie. Fun means different things in different genres, which kind of does tie into the question that Emily has asked here in the chat. How do these beats change for each genre, drama versus horror versus comedy? The answer is they don't. The idea of what is fun in these different genres is different, though, right? So when we're going into premise scenes for a horror movie, those are going to be mostly scare sequences, right? Or the scariest sequences you can possibly pack into the movie that take advantage of your core premise are going to be in the premise scenes. If this is a comedy, those are going to be the funniest sequences and a bunch of really kind of over-the-top set pieces that are going to take full advantage of whatever it is that you have set up for the movie. So the beats themselves don't change. They apply to every genre. The length of the script might be slightly different in some genres, like, for instance, a historical drama. You have room to make that longer, and readers will give you more sort of mental space for pages than if it was a high-concept thriller, for example, which should be like 90 pages on the dot, basically. So yeah, genre won't affect the beats themselves. It will, at most, it will affect how long your story should kind of be. Good questions, though. Let's move to midpoint. Who wants to tell us about midpoint? Wes, do you want to go again?
Yeah, I'm struggling to remember what midpoint is. If I'm if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, the midpoint is where it's like the protagonist has to make a decision. Do I want to move forwards and solving this problem, the main problem that the premise is presenting, or do I just want to go back to living my previous? I think that might be it. I could be wrong.
It can be that, but really just the most important thing for the midpoint is this is one definitive thing that happens that raises the stakes. So stakes are raised at the midpoint, and often it's actually too late for them to go back. Not always. Like they might have a chance to, I don't know, give up around now, but for the most part they're committed to this journey, and the midpoint is going to be about the stakes have gotten higher. So that might be that if the whole first part of your movie is them trying to kill the alien, then once they kill the alien at the midpoint, holy crap, it's holding a homing beacon, and we realize it's just called the mothership to come to Earth, right? So this is a very clear, very, very, very unmissable thing that happens that shows that the stakes have escalated. That's really the most important thing. It can be a big reveal. It doesn't have to be. It might be some new clue or some revelation. It doesn't have to be. It might be a twist. It doesn't have to be. But it's a moment that shows the stakes are now higher. Let's go to escalation. Volunteers? Merc, do you want to go again? Wes?
Well, just kind of still kind of educated guess. So I'm assume if we go back with the alien example. So if the midpoint is where like, oh, they killed the alien, but now they found there's a homing beacon calling for the mothership full of aliens to come over to Earth. I'm assuming the escalation is when that mothership lands, and
It might
stuff
be.
happens.
But so you don't have to rush to that happening. Escalation is you have to look at all the things that matter to your character, right? So we're hitting them with various costs, and you're exacting various costs on them. So we just found out the mothership is coming. Now Earth's government is panicking. Your main character tries to get to the UN to tell them that they have some fix for the problem. And as they're on the way, they get a call from their wife, and their wife is leaving them. This is where we hit them with everything. Think of their personal relationships, think of their physical cost, think of the mental cost. Just start stacking up various difficulties on them and hitting them hard. That's all escalation is. Then that's leading us up to... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So in the context of like a hero's journey where you have a mentor is lost, the mentor dies, does that happen in the escalation piece of the story,
usually,
or is that a little bit?
That's usually all is lost.
Okay.
Because it's like, how can we possibly win without Obi-Wan? And that's the reason why that is such a big dramatic moment, is because it's like, well, Obi-Wan was always the wise one who knew what was going on and he knew what to do next. Now Luke is on his own. So that's what that all is lost, and that transitions us to that all is lost moment, which is a culmination of these various costs. Now one clear thing happens that shows that your main character is in big trouble, and their goal is either impossible or feels or seems impossible. Now that we've lost Gandalf or Obi-Wan, it doesn't seem like we can win anymore. And that's going to transition us to the Pit of Despair, where the character is now forced to reckon with that loss. All the hobbits are sobbing on the ground after we lose Gandalf. And, Boromir's like, give them a minute for pity's sake. And Aragorn's like, no, we have to go now. Grabs them all, forces them along. They're all just devastated by this loss. So now this is the all is lost, or the Pit of Despair is when after the big breakup, you go home and you're eating ice cream out of the big tin, or you're going through the Wendy's drive-thru at 3 a.m. and crying because you broke up and you're so sad. And then the break into 3 is going to be the culmination of this sequence here, where we're going to swing back up. I'll just take the rest of it just for purposes of time. Your break into 3 is going to be your main character, because of the journey of the movie, is going to be able to realize something that they weren't able to realize before, or they are going to have some new surge of passion or faith or competence or something as a result of what we've watched. It shouldn't be something out of nowhere. It needs to be a result of what has happened so far. Because let's think of Morpheus has been kidnapped in the Matrix. It seems like we're going to have to pull the plug on him. But because of the journey that Neo has gone on, he starts to feel like, I know I'm not the one, and that's okay. I still feel like I can go in there and win, because we're going to try something so crazy it's never worked before. I'm going to find, the faith in myself and in my team to continue and to keep fighting because of what I've learned over this journey. So make sure it's not something random. Then when we go into the finale, that's going to be your big final confrontation. Your bad guy and good guy will face off once again, whatever that means for your story. And then it's going to be awesome, and it should top all the other sequences so far. And then it's going to end with they either win or they lose, they get what they want or they don't get what they want, and they're left with a kind of new normal, which we're going to clarify in the epilogue and give us a peek at what is up ahead. Okay. Questions from anyone on any of these story beats? You guys all feel like you have a pretty good understanding of this by now? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I guess I don't know if I have a question for right now. Maybe it's for later in their presentation and stuff, but or in the class. But I was wondering about like advice for making emotional moments, whether it's if you're trying to create sadness or create joy or create embarrassment or whatever different emotions, whether in the characters or but mostly in the audience, like how to help the audience feel that. Just like I guess I'm kind of curious about that, so maybe it's time for later, but.
Sure, yeah, that's, I guess, not so much a structure question as just a storytelling question, right? It's just how to make the audience feel stuff?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Great question. I wish people would ask stuff like this is such a broad question, but I do wish people would ask stuff like this more, believe it or not. So how do you make the audience feel stuff? One, we need a character that we can invest in that is also feeling those things. Imagine in a horror story if the main character was never scared. Would we be scared? No, we couldn't be. That starts to feel like a comedy almost, doesn't it? So the main character needs to be feeling the things that, or at least the character that we are primarily watching in the moment. Like, I know we can get invested in a side character, or we can get invested in the villain even potentially, and those things, like, we just have to have somebody that is feeling the thing that we want the audience to also feel. Certain things really play into, like, and I think if we're going to look at the very basic principles of how to make the audience feel something is, first of all, you have to make them want something, and then they either get it or they don't. And that's just going to come down to this basic storytelling principle of promises and payoff, right? Because if the whole movie is about your character trying their hardest to do something, and all they want to do is win this contest, well, we're sort of making the promise that, first of all, the story is going to revolve around that contest, and that their internal development is going to hinge on do they succeed or do they not, or like what are the various trials they go through in attempting to overcome that contest, or, you know, the challenges of the contest. And second of all, the more they try, the more the audience is going to want it too, right? Think of a movie like Whiplash. How many people in the audience really care about competitive college-level jazz drumming? Not that many. It's kind of difficult it's a little bit abstract. It's very technical, and it is very hard to access or understand, but that movie makes it effortless to engage with because you see how badly the main character wants it. And because the character wants it, we, the audience, want it. Because as long as it's something that we can understand wanting, and that's where the really key point of your character has to be pursuing something that the audience also can relate to wanting. If your character's goal is, I want to kill everyone, even if they really, really want that, the audience isn't going to be able to get too into it, because it's like, well, I can't even imagine why anyone would ever want to kill everyone. So you got to find a way that you can give us a goal and stakes that feel like the audience can relate to them in some way. And some people think of that as a very limiting thing, but it's actually not really limiting at all, because there's tons of things that people can want. But it basically comes down to what? Power, security, love, revenge, like these things that are very basic to the human experience. We have to make sure that your characters are trying to pursue those things. And putting us in situations where the audience sort of feels like they are there, or they are vicariously experiencing those things. Like, think of in Whiplash again, like the embarrassment of being yelled at by your teacher in a classroom. For a lot of people is much more relatable and visceral than the threat of a killer is going to cut your head off with a chainsaw, because we've all been in the being yelled at in a classroom kind of scenario, or I don't know if we've all had that happen, but close enough that we can all relate to that happening. So, if we're going to boil this down to three key things: one, make sure the characters are pursuing something that the audience understands and also wants. Two, show the character really wanting those things. And three, you have to have the character either get those things or not get those things. And whatever the feeling is, and make sure you have like a certain sense of ups and downs and peaks and valleys, and the journey isn't all success or all failure, because then it will feel more real. It'll feel like they actually have a legitimate chance of failing. And if the stakes are high enough, and so I guess I'll say point the fourth, high stakes, then it will allow the characters to care more, and thus allow the audience to care more. So I hope that gives you just sort of 4 basic points and 4 just like tips on how to make an audience feel stuff. It's going to come down to promising something and then either delivering it or deliberately not delivering it.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. What do you feel like for like comedy then? Like to make the audience laugh is a similar idea?
Yeah, and comedy is about losers. Competent characters, or characters that are always getting the better of everybody, are not that funny for the most part. We're looking to relate to people in the terms of, oh, I'm kind of a loser like that too. I have also been a coward and a failure, and I've also been a slacker, or someone who wants to just get rich quick, or we're taking the worst parts of humanity and we're allowing it to be okay by allowing the audience to root for those things, because we're like, well, a coward can kind of be a cool character to root for in a certain sense, can't they? If we're allowed to laugh at them and to sort of either make them the butt of the joke, like you can laugh at the characters, or you can even just laugh with the characters as they get into some sort of, absurdly relatable situations in which they are, same as before, trying to accomplish a goal. They are either being, there are obstacles there that they are coming up with, they're addressing them in interesting ways, and just the things that are happening are, I don't know, unusual. The things that are happening are subverting our expectations of how those things should go, in quotes, should go. So that's just some very basic, I know that's not super specific, but just some basic points on comedy storytelling. Allow the losers and the lower status people to be the heroes.
Yeah. And then I was also realizing when I was asking the question about like embarrassment, I was like, oh yeah, the audience wouldn't feel embarrassed, but they would feel bad for the character being embarrassed. So then thinking of the, like, not the formula, but the method you mentioned, like that if it's like in a romance and someone like has a crush on somebody else and then their pants get pulled down and their underwear is showing or something, then they feel bad. So then the audience feels bad for that character in that moment because they're not getting what they want, which is to look good in front of their person.
Right. Good point. Yeah, for sure. That's sort of the basis of it. But then you should also think, like, it's not just us feeling bad. Some audience members do get so legitimately embarrassed by these things they can't even watch The Office, for instance. Like, I've met a lot of people who have said, I cannot watch that stuff because I relate to it too much. So there's a line where you'll start to lose some people, but that's not to say The Office is not the most popular sitcom ever, right? So clearly it's not so much that...
It just shows it's effective. It is effective.
Yeah, extremely effective. We will... In fact, you can make someone feel embarrassment more than you can make them feel the mortal fear of getting your head cut off. Because we know at the end of the day you're not going to get your head cut off by a movie, but if you're watching a character experience some social anxiety or faux pas, then we do feel that much more directly because we're like, our brain thinks it's really happening right there.
Right. And then also I was thinking of a different example. Have you seen Wakanda Forever, like the second Black Panther movie?
No, I saw the first one, but you can spoil the second. It's okay.
Okay. Okay. Basically, the villain, quote unquote, in Wakanda Forever, like he wants to kill everybody or like take over. I can't even remember exactly, but it's like kill or take over everybody else because they are trying to do something that will harm his civilization and all that. But for me, the way that they put that out and just like the idea of it, I understood it, but I could not get on board. Like I couldn't feel for him enough. And I guess we weren't supposed to completely feel for him. It was just kind of weird. I was like, I don't even know what I'm feeling here. I'm just feeling like that's kind of still dumb, dude. Like, so it's just kind of like annoying, and I was kind of disappointed in it overall.
Right.
So yeah, but since you haven't seen it, I don't know if we're going to add too much on that. But it's just
that's
interesting.
okay.
I love studying all this.
It's a good point though that we should have that apply to the villain too, right? Like, it's not just something for the hero, but the villain should have some kind of relatable goal to some extent. I mean, not always. You can get away with a villain that's just a monster that wants to eat everybody, but still, it's hungry and it wants to eat. We still get that, don't we? Like, and you can maybe in certain genres you can have a serial killer that just kills people for no reason, and that just is scary and unknowable in its own way, and that does work. But a lot of the time, especially in action adventure storytelling, you want to have a villain their goals make sense and are fully thought through, even if they are using this kind of twisted logic. Like the villain in the first Black Panther, I thought was the best character in the whole movie, and had a goal that made a lot of sense and was right about a lot. And a villain being right about something is usually really key to making them work.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's where the other one I was like, like it didn't fully.
His logic just didn't seem to even add up consistently.
Yeah, I was like, still that's not so great. Like, yeah, exactly.
I see. Yeah. So that's the thing. If you have a villain with a relatable goal, or a villain that you want us to invest in and be interested by, and they aren't just like a force of nature, basically. Like, you can have a Zodiac killer, or you can have Jason Voorhees, or you can have, you know, a shark be the villain of the movie. They don't really need to have a very super relatable goal. But at the end of the day, if that only works in a small percentage of stories, and most of the time the villain should be right about something, even if the way that they are going about their goal is completely wrong.
Yeah. And then also, just like circling back to romance, because that's my like main interest when I write and stuff. I often struggled because like I think of like the goal, or like the character's goal, maybe at the beginning if they're not looking for anybody, but eventually they start to feel like, oh, I want to be with that person, or I want to find my person, and I kind of feel like it's like a gargantuan goal, and then like how can you fill a bunch of scenes with pursuing that goal? But then if you like break it down, and something you said triggered in me, like, oh yeah, you could break it down to like, oh, they want to meet anybody first, and then meet a person, and then decide, oh, is this my person? Oh no, this is actually a bad date. And then the next one is, oh, actually I did meet my person, so now, or a potential person, so now I will their goal is to see them again. Then the next step, get their number, or hang out with them, or be acknowledged, have them, you know, whatever, like those tinier baby steps. So I'm like, okay, that's all in the umbrella of finding your person, and so it just, I don't know,
exactly.
just more. So thank you.
Sure. That's a good point. If your character's goal is just find love, then that has many steps to it. That's not just a one thing that you do to find love. That requires trial and error and backsliding and making mistakes and all these other things. So if your character's goal is just to find somebody, then we will understand each of these things to be in pursuit of their goal if you make their goal clear enough to us. And sometimes your character's goal, even in a romance story, might be something like, I want to just stay in my bubble. My goal is, in fact, to not have romance. And then the challenges of the movie come when, oh, I met the perfect person, though. But they're like, oh, no, but my goal, I can't be with someone, I'll just get hurt. I have to push them away now. Like, that might be how you might approach that storyline, too, where if they think that their goal, or the thing that they want, is to keep everything the same, but the thing that they need is to find love. And the character needs to find love is the goal of every romance story.
I love that. I love that so much.
And we don't have a lot of romance writers on here, so I'm glad that we have someone who's actually interested in it, because I don't know all the nuances and intricacies of it. I don't watch a lot of stuff like that. But now and again, I'll watch one and I'm like, that was so good. Why don't I watch these? When I saw Palm Springs, I was like, oh my god, rom-coms can be amazing.
Oh, cool. I haven't heard of that one yet. I'll have to watch it. I mostly watch like K-dramas, like Korean shows. Yeah, Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, yeah, it's on Hulu. It's a fantasy rom-com with Andy Samberg. And
fantasy rom-com, that's awesome.
Yeah, don't look up a trailer for it.
Oh, okay, good.
Go in blind. It's brilliant.
That's so good. Oh, yeah.
So check that out.
If you like Korean shows, do you watch any Korean content?
Yeah, all the time.
Oh, cool. Have you seen Crash Landing on You? That's a good romance, action, comedy. Oh, definitely check it out. It's on Netflix. It's so good. It's about a South Korean businesswoman who ends up landing accidentally in North Korea.
Oh, that's kind of cool. And then she is trying to get home?
Basically, and it's so good. Like, it's excellent. Yeah, especially, I recommend it a lot.
Cool.
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, let us know. I'm watching Alice in Borderland. It's Japanese, not Korean, right now, but on Netflix also. Really enjoying that sort of fantasy, dark fantasy thriller, I guess you'd call it.
Nice.
Okay, so we're towards the end of our time, so I'm just going to take these last few minutes and just show you guys what a story beats outline and what a set of scene cards is going to look like, and then we'll call it for today. And I'll make sure to also just take any last questions. So let's bring up the outline of the movie I'm working on now. So this is called Undergrowth. On my outline document, this is separate from my sketchbook document, because I have when you develop the sketchbook enough and you've written out a couple versions of your story beats, then I usually make a brand new document and call this one the outline. So it's gonna not involve any of the sort of sketching or the many just like side tangents and ideas that the earlier sketchbook had. But so you can see on the left side of my screen, I have used the document outline to build out the entire structure of the movie. We have each of the structural beats that are labeled here. You can click on them and go right to them. And then each of the scenes is not only named, but it has the page numbers that it will likely take place on directly next to it here. Each individual card is anywhere from 1 sentence to like 3 to 5 sentences. This is not what you're doing this week, but for the following week, you will be working on this scene card outline. So we use this. This is about 13 pages for me. It includes a couple of maps, and I don't need 2 versions of that map, do I? So I have maps and things like that I need on page 1. And on my page 1, I also just have the bare essentials at the very top. Genre, comps, logline, and then here I have a description of what will be on the poster and the tagline as well. You don't need to have that, but I just thought it'd be fun to describe those things to help me understand what it would look like. On the next page, I have the map of the property and a name of the names and ages of the major characters. And that's just to all help me keep everything straight. From there, we get directly into the scene cards themselves, and as I'm working, I'll highlight them green to show that they are finished. If something's wrong, I highlight it yellow to show that something needs to change, and if it needs to be cut, then I'll highlight it red as I work through it. So that's how a working outline document is usually going to look. I'm going to bring up story beats. Actually, my story beats for the knowledge are just a little bit clearer. So story beats is going to be between 1 and 3 pages usually. Here we go. So story beats summary. So you can see, again, we have each of the sections with a header above it that says the name of that structural section, plus then also the pages that it will take place on. So if you have a longer, I'm mostly outlining for 90 pages, so if you're writing something longer than 90 pages, then these things, you're going to have a little more room for each of the structural beats, right? We have the catalyst here, which is just 1 moment. We have the trying the lock sequence, which is going to be, and you can see here I'm using bullet points to kind of denote what these scenes would be, even though I haven't figured out exactly what pages they would take place on yet. But I know at least the heading will tell us generally what pages it will be. And that tells us a pretty good sense of how much space we have in each of these sections. The longest section, of course, is going to be premise scenes, or fun and games, as they're sometimes called. And that's going to be like 8 or 9 different bullet points for me. We have the midpoint, which is just 1 single bullet point. Your escalation sequence, or bad guys close in, as it's sometimes called, usually about 5 little bullet points. All is lost is just 1 single one. We have our pit of despair, and then our break into 3, and finale is going to be pretty substantial as well, considering it's 20 pages of movie. And then we have about 5 pages for the denouement at the end. But I hope that just gives you a picture of what this should look like that you're going to be working on for next week. All right, so let's take questions on anything we've talked about today and on what you're going to be working on for next week. I'll bring up that card that summarizes what we'll be doing. But essentially, you are going to be completing your story beats, and you're going to be reading a brand new script that you've never read before from the blacklist. So cover to cover, and come ready to discuss what did you notice, what did you like, what did you learn, things like that. There's no discussion questions. There's no right or wrong answers. But you should be reading scripts every week and coming to class prepared to talk about them. Okay, let me stop for questions now on anything we've discussed today. Everybody totally clear on what to do for next time?
Yeah, so for the story beats, it's what you just showed us. Like, it's just a quick idea of the story beats and an idea of the pagination, correct?
So yeah, because you should I would first look at the genre that you're writing in and just estimate how many pages total you want. So in your case, you're doing a historical horror. I think you have a little more room in a historical to kind of build out the world and stuff. So maybe give yourself a hard limit of like 110 pages. And then above each of the sections, then you're going to be writing like your intro is going to be maybe like 1 to 15. And then your catalyst will be on page 15. And then your trying the locks will be like 15 to 25, right? And then you'll just write that out above each of those sections, but you don't need to delineate the length of every single scene. Just the headings on those structural beats themselves.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions?
Well, I was gonna wonder, I'm thinking about this, like, screenplay I'm writing about a metalhead, And Blacklist, I would just ask, do you think there's any screenplay you could orient me from the Blacklist's history that might even be able to impact my comedy? Oh, to be frank, there was a film I was thinking about that hopefully I would look into to influence Metal Lords.
Yeah, Metal
Okay,
Lords, right?
Metal Lords. Never seen it, never read it, but I'm ready.
I haven't read. I'm not sure if the script is out there, but it might be. I would do some googling. You might be able to find it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was even thinking School of... Oh, but yeah, there's specifically this one film that I think hopefully influences the tone a lot. Have you ever seen this 2017 Kentucky Audley Albert Burney film, Silvio? These two directors, really based. They're awesome.
It's called
Definitely give
Silvio.
them I would definitely give them a chance. It's Silvio and their newer feature, which is even crazier. Okay, this gorilla movie has touched my heart, but they also made a new film called The Strawberry Mansion.
Okay, well maybe list just the links in the chat, and it would be. I'm sure some folks would look into this. Silvio, yeah, never heard of this.
Ah, lovely. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Connor.
Sure. So you're totally clear on what to do next time? No questions on any of the structure stuff?
No, I think I got it. I even ran through the structure and kind of that you just went through, and I even pieced together in my head the decision to leave.
Great.
So that was fun, but I'm clear on that. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Everyone else all good? Last call for questions?
Yeah, just I think I asked for the link to the Blacklist site, and I think Nacho shared something. I don't know what just.
Yeah, it looks like the macro's not
is there
working. I can just message it to you after this.
Appreciate it.
Sure. Everyone else all good? So for next week, read a whole script very carefully, through and through, cover to cover. Write out your story beats, and if you haven't settled on that logline yet, of course, you'll need to have a finalized logline for it before you can really get into your story. But so that's the objectives for next time. We'll hopefully see you next week at the same time slot, so 11 to 1 on Sundays. All right, guys, thanks so much for coming by. We hope that you signed up for ScriptCamp if you've not already done so, and we hope to see you in a class soon. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Have a great one, Connor.
Thank